Mythology and religion constitute the highest level of the spiritual life of an ethnos, which also often determine the course of various historical events. The Balts did not have a written language and did not leave any scriptures and canons of rituals. We may only attempt to reconstruct their religion and the cults from the short comments in the chronicles and annals of other countries and travelers' notes. The pagan past was still alive in people's memory at the time when the first histories of Lithuania were written in the 16th century by Alexander Gvanini and Maciej Strykovski. Many features of the old religion told into folk beliefs and traditions after Lithuania's conversion to Christianity. Fragments of myths can be recognized in folklore creations, etiological stories and fairy tales. Archaeological explorations, especially the findings in burial and sacrificial places, may also sometimes tell us something about the religious practices of the past. There is not enough data to reconstruct the religious systems of individual Baltic tribes. Researchers succeeded in barely outlining the main differences between the beliefs of the Lithuanians, the Latvians and the Prussians. However, there are more commonalities than differences between them, especially since they once had a common Indo-European origin as well. Generally, two distinctive heritages may be identified in the structure of Baltic religion and mythology: relics of totemism and the female goddess cult, coming from pre-Indo-European times. There also existed a well-ordered religious system, which also corresponded to the structure of society brought by the warlike tribes of Indo-European origin. The first hunters who wandered into the territory of Lithuania in the post-glacial period brought not only their material culture, but also ideas about the surrounding world, what we now call a world view shaped by their lifestyle. The Paleolithic and Mesolithic culture was characterized by animistic beliefs that spiritualized the material world. At the center of this cult was the totem, an animal or a bird representing a protector of a tribe. Myths, stories that were sacredly believed, were created about totems. Since religion is a practiced spiritual activity, the beliefs and myths must be accompanied by rituals. The myth and the ritual may be seen as the theoretical and the practical sides of a religion. Myths claimed that there must be a certain order in nature and in society. This order was maintained by a periodically repeated ritual, which usually reenacted the events from the time when gods created the world. To indicate that he is moving into the sacred time and space, the priest used to behave in an unusual manner by singing words, gesticulating strangely, making unnatural movements, etc. That is why the ritual acquired an artistic shape, expressed through chants, music and dance. At the top of the pantheon of Lithuanian gods, we find three deities, characteristic of the Indo-European family of nations: the creator of the world god, the thunder god Perkūnas, and the underworld god Velinas. This system was conditioned by the social structure rungs of the early society: priests and chieftains, warriors and farmers, as well as stock breeders. God was protector to priests and chieftains, Perkūnas to warriors, and Velinas to farmers. The gods forewarned humans about dangers and misfortunes, offered protection and defense, as well as teaching them the truths about life and wisdom. Religious people felt safe, as if being at the center of the world. Their life on earth was existence between life and death, earth and sky, world and heaven. At the times of the commonality of the Balts, there was also a belief in the female goddess that makes the land fertile. As agriculture became the main source of livelihood, people began to believe that crops were protected by the spirit of the ancestors. The manes were honored and fed during the celebrations of the harvest and the cold half-year. The names of the deities worshipped by the Lithuanian tribes were first mentioned in the Russian annals of the mid-13th century. The Galician-Volhynian chronicle said that the baptism of King Mindaugas was feigned, because the king was allegedly secretly making sacrificial offerings to his own gods, Nonadivis, Televelis, Divirixas, the hair god, and Medena. The name of god Andaias was also mentioned further on. An insert in the translation of the Chronicle of John Malala of 1261 said that priest Sovius ordered to make a sacrifice for, quote, wicked gods Andaias and Perkūnas, in other words the thunder, Zvoruna, in other words the bitch, and blacksmith Televelis, who has forged the sun for them that shines on earth, and who has thrown the sun for them into the sky, end quote. We may presume that Nonadivis and Andaias are elevatory names for God. Below the highest level of deities that created and ruled the world, the sources allow for the clear identification of two more hierarchies, that of deities which accompanied the life of humans and determined their faith, and that of the mythic beings which protected the annual work of humans. The areas of their guardianship are also different. The first ones were acting in the household, the second ones in the farmstead and on the fields. Space and time were defined and segmented. The distribution of their parts for the guardianship of different deities induced the feeling of safety in humans and allowed predicting the outcomes of the work, that is, foreseeing the future. The Balts approached their gods in sacrificial places, which could have been sacred groves, powerful or oddly shaped solitary trees, large stones, fresh or healing water springs, and shapely hills. Later, sacral buildings appeared on defensive mounds as well. High priests were kindling the sacral fire in the main sanctums of the tribes, such as the Prussian Ramove and Rikijotas and Lithuanian Šventaragis Valley. They used to convey the message of gods on the most important occasions of the tribe's life, whether a war campaign or a distant journey would be successful, whether the crops would be rich, whether a place was suitable for the construction of a castle, etc. Sacrifices to gods were also made before commencing major agricultural works, sowing and pasturing. In autumn, gods were thanked by making sacrificial offerings for the harvest.
Po Lietuvos ir Žemaičių krikšto senoji lietuvių religija turėjo sunykti. Valdovo įsakymu buvo
The old Lithuanian religion had to disappear after the introduction of Christianity to Lithuania and Samagitia. The priest estate was abolished and sacred places were demolished by the order of the sovereign. However, the Christianing of the country was not immediate. There was a lack of priests, and the establishment of new parishes was slow. Nevertheless, the old religious system was doomed. 3 stages may be distinguished in its long agony. First, it lost the backing of the nobles. Some elements of the religious tradition were preserved while the old generation was still alive. This process could have protracted until the middle of the 15th century in locations far away from the administrative centers. In some places it could have lasted even longer, because the priests, having become herdsmen and mendicants, did not lose their former high social status. Elsewhere, village people were left without spiritual leaders and performed their religious practices as they saw fit. Therefore, a lot of gods and demons appeared on the level of various cults, beliefs and superstitions in the 16th century. Peasants viewed the agricultural aspect of religion as the most important. Therefore, village religiosity emerged in the second period, which should be seen as genuine paganism. It included seasonal agricultural festivities. Religious imagery preserved the deities of fertility and fecundity.
O religiniuose įvaizdžiuose išlaiko vaisingumo ir darlumo dievybės. 16 amžiuje apie senąją lietuvių religiją
Jan Lasitsky, Simon Grunau and Luke David, who wrote about the old Lithuanian religion in the 16th century, list quite a number of them. Such local and not very stable systems could have been viable until the second half of the 16th century. These religious formations had inherited some of the features of the old religion, but developed further according to their own inner logic. The establishment of new parishes, and especially the founding of monastic schools, are the main reasons for the withering of paganism in the third stage. This phenomenon is clearly observable in the context of the activities of Bishop Merkelis Giedraitis and the Jesuit order. Pagan rites could no longer be performed publicly and receded to the family environment, gradually transforming into traditional customs. The relics of the old religion turned into ethnographic beliefs, losing their sacredness. This happened already in the 17th century. Seasonal festivities were formalized in the Christian religion. However, festivities were picked out from their large list and emphasized only if their dates corresponded to the agricultural terms or transformations of natural phenomena. Nevertheless, the sway of the church over village people was not so great as to totally eliminate the vestiges of mythology, distinctive cosmogony and cosmology from their consciousness. All of these have survived in the form of stories, fairy tales and beliefs until our days and are still recorded by folklore collectors.
Buvo tokia stipri, kad iš jo sąmonės galutinai išlotų mitologijos likučius, savitą kosmogoniją ir kosmologiją. Visa tai sakmių, pasakų, tikėjimų forma išliko iki mūsų dienų ir dar fiksuojama folkloro rinkėjų.